Thank you for all of that introduction. I appreciate it. And hello to operating engineers, Local 77. I might note from the time I announced for the United States Senate when I was a kid, I had the support of the operating engineers. I love you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys were founded 122 years ago. That's not when I got endorsed. Skilled workers operated all kinds of construction equipment. There can't be a better place to talk about the progress we've made together, how it's working with the country, and how our MAGA, by the way, please sit down. I failed to tell you to say that to you. Thank you. You know, I'm going to just say at the front end, this ain't your father's Republican Party. It's a different deal right now. And a minority of the party, the MAGA, I call the MAGA Republicans, control the party. And they're in Congress threatening to undo all the stuff that you've helped me get done. That's why I'm here today, because you and the American people should know about the competing economic visions of the country that are really at stake right now. I'm here in this Union Hall with you when just 2 days ago, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, went to Wall Street to describe the MAGA economic vision for America. And it's very clear, they've laid it out. I know when I was telling you it was going to happen, I'm telling folks, they looked at me like, that can't happen. Well, guess what? It's attempted to try to happen now. Massive cuts in programs you count on. Massive benefit protected for those at the top. A lot of, all the tax cuts go to the top, none to the bottom. The threat of defaulting on America's debt for the first time in 230 years. We've never, ever defaulted on the debt. And it will destroy this economy. And who do you think will hurt the most? You. Hard-working people, the middle class, the neighborhoods I got raised in. Not the super wealthy or the powerful, but working folks. And that's what I want to talk about today. And I know where I stand. I make no apologies, and I mean this sincerely, for being the most pro-union president in American history. It's not just because I grew up with you all, it's because it's true. When I speak to the business roundtable and the muckety-mucks, a lot of decent people, all the business enterprises, they look at me like, hey guys, don't jump, okay? But all kidding aside, they look at me like, why am I always talking about unions? I say because, they don't appreciate how damn hard you all work, how damn hard it is for you to be able to become something other than an apprentice. It takes 4 years to train an apprentice. Just like going back to school. Tell business leaders all the time, I tell them, that I'm pro-union because union workers are the best workers in the world, and you are the best, not a joke. That's the God's truth. That is the God's truth. You're the best in the world. It's better long-term for them to hire you because you get the job done, you get it done on time, and ultimately it costs them less when they hire you. So I've said many times, Wall Street didn't build America. The middle class built America. And unions built the middle class. That's a fact. Unions. One of the reasons I ran for president was to rebuild the backbone of this country, the middle class. To grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not from the top down. Because when the middle class does well, the poor have a ladder up and the wealthy do very well still. And we middle class, you get a shot. We do well as well. And that's a clear contrast to my friends on the other side of the aisle these days. Didn't used to be, but it is now. For decades, they've said that the best way to grow the economy is from the top down, trickle-down economics. Well, growing up, I didn't see a whole hell of a lot trickle down in our 3-bedroom house with 4 kids at my dad's kitchen table. You know what? Trickle down didn't work for us. And it didn't work for a long time. And by the way, it's not just what's been in the MAGA Republicans. For the last 3-4 decades, we've been losing ground. And, and it's hollowed out the middle class. Rewarding wealth, not work. Rewarding companies moving overseas because they get cheaper labor. Look at a lot of you know, maybe you come from neighborhoods and small towns, or like Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I came from, or Claymont, Delaware, where I came from, where there used to be a lot of pride because we had business, we had factories that were working, operating. In Scranton and Claymont, there were 4,500 steelworkers. There's none today. And not only do you lose the jobs, you lose a sense of pride. You lose a sense of who you are. You begin to wonder, does anybody see me? I mean it sincerely. Those of you from the Midwest, travel through the Midwest. The towns where they had a factory employing 600, 800 people. You lose it, and you lose everything. A lot of people get this. How many of your friends you know of around the country who've had this conversation? Their son or daughter finishes their education in high school and comes to mom and dad and says, Mom, I can't stay. There's no work. I got to move. I got to leave. And why these jobs go overseas? Because of cheap labor. Rather than making the product here in America, we made it overseas, leading to wider economic inequity. And along the way, losing something else, as I said, pride. Literally pride. It matters. My dad never went to college. My dad was a decent, honorable man, busted his neck. But here's my dad. He talked about, everybody deserves to be treated with dignity, with recognizing their self-worth. And I mean it sincerely. It's not a joke. This is something I feel in my gut, not just my heart. How many of you know what it's like growing up in a community where that factory does shut down, where the community gets hollowed out? It gets hollowed out, literally. Folks, trickle-down economics doesn't work. And together we've been doing everything we can to turn things around. And with your help, one of the first things we did was pass the American Rescue Plan with not one of the other team voting for it. It helped vaccinate our nation. It delivered immediate relief to folks who needed it the most to get our economy back on track. It put small businesses back in business. It worked. It provided increased employment. And then I signed the bipartisan infrastructure law, making the case that to have the strongest economy in the world, we have to have the best infrastructure in the world. How in God's name can we lead the world with a second-rate infrastructure? The best roads, the best bridges, the best airports, the cleanest water, high-speed internet, and so much more. Can you believe that we used to be the best infrastructure rated number 1 in the world? You know where we're rated now internationally? We're rated number 13. 13 in the world. The United States of America is rated 13 in the world. And guess what? That's where you come in, to get us back on top. We've announced over 25,000 infrastructure projects so far. Over 4,500 cities and towns across the country, range from ports and airports, wind and solar projects. Operating engineers are going to be do the biggest groundbreaking for new and updated roads and bridges and so much more. Matter of fact, Lieutenant Governor always grabbed me for one bridge already. She grabbed me when I walked in. There you are, Gov. I don't blame you. I told her we view the Eastern Shore of Maryland as the Western Shore of Delaware. And also, the Bidens all come from Baltimore, going all the way back to the early 1800s, from Baltimore. You're the one that are going to, this is not hyperbole, it's a fact. You're going to transform America. You, the operating engineers, are going to transform America. And it can't get done without you. Without you, it can't get done. It's just, there's certain things that's a fact, obvious. And so, when we rebuild America, and I mean literally rebuild America, we're going to buy American. I've gotten a lot of criticism because there was a law passed in the early 30s that said buy American, but no president's really paid much attention to it. What it means is the money that Congress gives me to allocate to spend on projects, whether it's a new deck of an aircraft carrier or building an interstate highway or a bridge, I get to say it has to be American products, American workers. Every federal project built by American workers using American products, creating American jobs, is what I've done since I become president. I announced, and by the way, it's consistent with international trading agreements. I announced new standards that require all construction material used in a federal infrastructure project have to be made in America. The lumber, the glass, the drywall, the fiber optics, so much more. And guess what? It creates jobs down the line. And here's something else. Decades ago, the United States used to invest over 2% of its entire gross domestic product, all the money we spend, on research and development. We led the world in research. Today, we invest less than 1%. We used to rank number 1 in the world in research and development. Now we rank number 9 in the world. How in the hell does that happen? China was number 8 decades ago. Today, they're number 2, and we're number 9. And a lot of countries are closing in fast. I don't want to wish any other country well, but we have the best scientists, researchers, and people in the world. How in God's name do we let this happen? I'm serious. Think about it. That's why, with your help, I signed a law that initially when I suggested it, people thought, what are you doing? It's called the Chips and Science Act. Yes, sir. And guess what? I asked the CEOs of this company, and I've met with them all, you know, the Fortune 500 companies, and et cetera. I asked them, when the United States government invests in a considerable amount of resources in new industry, does that encourage or discourage private investment? To a person, everyone says it significantly encourages the willingness to bring private capital off the sideline. And that's how we bring new key parts of the supply chain back to America in semiconductors. As all of you know, these are small computer chips the size of the tip of my little finger. They affect nearly everything in our lives, from our cell phones, our automobiles, refrigerators, most sophisticated weapon systems in the world, and it poses and possesses so much more. I want to remind everyone, America invented this computer chip. We invented it by investing in going to the moon a while ago, okay? We increased the sophistication many times over. We made them smaller, faster, more powerful. And over time, we went from producing 40% of the world's chips down to 10%, despite our leading the world in research and design. How did that happen? I mean, deadly earnest. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. How did that happen? We all saw during the pandemic, when things slowed down in the Far East, where we imported so many of our computer chips. What happened? People all of a sudden didn't know. All of a sudden, the public became educated in what a supply chain is. People never talked about it before. Supply chain is when that factory closes down in the South Pacific, guess what? There's not enough chips to build automobiles in Detroit. It's shut down. Families get hurt. Example, every new vehicle built in America needs roughly 3,000 of these chips per vehicle. During the pandemic, as you may remember, auto companies couldn't get enough of these chips. Prices went up because the price of cars went through the ceiling. Inflation, biggest cost for inflation. But now all over the country, companies are investing in America. Not just American companies, but foreign companies. I asked the large South Korean company why they're investing in American computer chips to build the factories here. They said, because you have the best workers in the world. They said, not me. We do. And guess what? It went from a relatively small investment. You know how much we're investing now? $400 billion. $400 billion in advanced manufacturing. A record amount of investment back at home in any time in our history. For example, in Ohio, I visited what I call the Field of Dreams, about 1,000 acres outside of Columbus, where Intel has committed $20 billion to build what they call a new chip fab, a factory. They call them fabs. And guess what? It's going to hire a hell of a lot of people, 7,000 people building and you're all going to get paid the prevailing wage at those people. And by the way, and the other 5,000 people working full-time in these factories when they're built, and they're bigger than football fields, the size of these factories. Guess what? Average salary, $130,000 a year. And you do not need a college degree to have the job. Well, the same story's up in New York State, Texas, Arizona, Idaho. Jobs in both construction and operating these fabs. They're about the size, I said, of football fields. Jobs that pay an average of $130,000 a year permanent. Jobs that don't, as I said, require a college degree. It matters. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the recent headlines of the Wall Street Journal, not what I call a left-wing paper. It says, America is back in the factory business. That's the headline. Fortune magazine headline, Biden's massive manufacturing push is working. Financial Times, transformational change. Biden's industrial policy begins to bear fruit. Folks, it's bearing fruit because of all of you, because I have confidence in you, because you're getting the job done. Folks, my economic plan is the blue-collar blueprint to rebuild America. And that's not all. I get how folks are struggling with inflation. I grew up in a house where the price of gas went up, you felt it. It was a discussion at the kitchen table, not a joke. Inflation has been a global problem because of two things. A pandemic that disrupted these supply chains around the world, Putin's war in Ukraine, which disrupted energy supplies and food supplies, causing the price of everything from eggs to wheat to go up. We have a lot more to do, but inflation has been coming down 9 months in a row. It's down 45%, and again, we have to do more. It's still a big problem. The way I think about it is the way my dad talked about it around the kitchen table. He said, how much are your monthly bills? How much do you have left to pay for all the necessities when you pay your major bills? And will there be enough at the end of the month just to have a little bit of breathing room, just a little bit of breathing room? Many of you have been through that. Well, that's why, with your help, I signed the thing called the Inflation Reduction Act. There's more than one way to bring down the cost of raising a family or controlling a household. That's all the other expenses. If you can bring them down, that aren't counted in inflation, bring them down, it reduces the pressure on you. Give it a little bit of breathing room. For example, Americans pay more for prescription drugs than any other advanced nation on earth. The same exact drug. You pay more in the United States and France, Germany, England, wherever you go. I've been fighting for years as a senator and vice president to allow Medicare to negotiate the price of those drugs, to negotiate the price. Guess what? We allowed the Veterans Department to be able to negotiate price for the veterans, but that's been in place. But we've never allowed Medicare to do this. But finally we beat Big Pharma. We got it done again without a single Republican vote. Look, it's had a profound impact on so much more, and there's so much more to come. How many of you know anybody with diabetes? Okay, well, guess what? You're now paying $35 instead of $500 a month for that insulin. God love you, man. By the way, you talk about allowing people the dignity. I was in Virginia before I got this passed at a town meeting. This is about a year ago, and a woman stood up. She said, she didn't break down, but she was very emotional. He said, I have 2 children with diabetes. I don't have enough private insurance to be able to pay for it. We have to cut the dosage. We have to trade off. How do you feel as a parent? Looking out at your child, knowing if you can't get them the drug they need, it may affect their life and their very, very, very existence. Well, guess what? That's changed. 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. Every day, millions use insulin to control the diabetes so they can stay alive. Insulin's been around for over 100 years. And when the guy invented it, he didn't even patent it because he thought everybody should be able to access it. You know how much it costs these companies to make that insulin? $10 dollars. To package it, maybe another $1.50, maybe $2. But they were charging $400, $500, $600, $700 a month. And folks, Big Pharma has been unfairly charging and making record profits. Not anymore. We began by capping the cost of insulin at $35 a month for seniors. Initially, I proposed for everybody. I couldn't get enough folks I lost a couple Democrats. But we're coming back at it. And that's not all. The law, and when I told people that it was going to be $35 a month, when it got passed last year, I don't blame them. They looked at me like, yeah, Joe. Didn't occur until January 1, it didn't start. Well, guess what happens? This law brings total drug costs down the way people need. How many of you have had cancer or know someone who does? This law will cap out-of-pocket costs for seniors on Medicare at a maximum $3,500 a year for every single drug they have to take. Every single drug. This year. And then the following year, it's a maximum of $2,000 a year, even if you're taking a $12,000, $14,000, $16,000 cancer drug. It's a game changer. And it's fair. This is nothing radical, it's just fair. You don't have to pay these prices in other countries. The Inflation Reduction Act also makes the most significant investment in dealing with climate ever anywhere in the world's history. And by the way, I can digress for just a moment. Before I announce my plan, which is the most consequential one in literally the history of the world, no country's ever done it, we've never done it, America's never seen it. I went to my friends in the union movement because you're all worried. I don't understand you. You've been told that you work on global warming is going to cost you jobs. And I sat down with one of my good friends, the head of the IBW, who just retired, going to a retirement party for him this week. And I laid out, you may remember hearing I getting beat out of me, but I didn't care about the environment. And then I met with a lot of you guys, met with your international presidents. And I said, you want to make some real money, this is where you're going to make it. Because it's going to help. By the way, guess what? When we're dealing with the IBW, they're going to put in 550,000 charging stations. 550,000. You all are going to build on the roads and highways and the bridges to get there. It's going to generate incredible economic growth. For example, and also families aren't even part of organized labor. They get $1,000 a year savings by providing a rebate when they buy a new efficient appliance or weatherize their home. They get a tax credit for purchasing heat pumps, rooftop solar energy, so they can afford to do it, and they get a tax credit for doing it. And the long-term savings for them is significant. Without going to everything, it also provides tax credits for electric vehicles, new or used, because we're convinced that the companies are going to move. Let me back up. I called a meeting of all the American automakers to the south lawn of the White House last summer, or the summer before. And I talked about the need for us to have to transition. And at the time, Mary Barra, the president of General Motors, was suing the state of California because they said they had an air quality standard higher than the federal government. And the argument was they couldn't do that. Well, I got a call from her 4 or 5 days later saying I dropped the suit. We've decided we're going to go all electric by 2035. Guess what? We also put in all electric over the near term. We're providing significant tax exemptions if you purchase a used or new all electric vehicle. It's a game changer. And by the way, anybody who doesn't think we have global warming, hang out with me, man. Travel every major fire I've been to. You know, more land has burned in 2 years to the ground because of global warming. More land because of fires as a consequence of the utility poles you put up and all the rest, all of it. More land is burned than the entire state of Maryland. Literally, all the land you read about burning from Arizona to Idaho and out west, more land burned to the ground and homes in the process than the entire size of the state of Maryland. And all of you in this room are going to play a big part. Those charging stations, those roads and access points and so much more. Because you're going to be building it. Folks, look around at our economic plan is working. We've created more than 12,000 brand new jobs in 2 years. That's more than any president in American history has created in 4 years. In 4 years. Unemployment is at 3.5%, near a 50-year low. And all for minorities as well. For African American unemployment is down low. Hispanic, across the board. Nearly 800,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs, the fastest growth in 40 years. Where in the hell is it written that says we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world again? I don't know where that's written. It's going to be us. You know this better than anyone. It's an all-time record for construction jobs. As I said, where's it written we can't manufacture more than anybody in the world? And by the way, we've made all this progress in a fiscally responsible way. All the talk of these guys, I'll get to this in a second, but how they're going to cut spending and the like. In my first 2 years in office, I brought the deficit down by a record $1.7 trillion. All we spent, still less than $1.7 trillion. Inflation Reduction Act is going to bring down deficits by hundreds of billions more in the decades ahead. And again, not a single Republican voted for it. Let me be clear again. Under my plan, no one earning less than $400,000 has seen nor will see, as long as I'm president, a single solitary penny raised in their taxes. Not a single penny. And we're able to make huge progress for the country by making the biggest corporations begin to pay their fair share. You all pay. You pay more than your fair share. No, I'm serious. And by the way, I come from the corporate capital of the world. I was a senator for 36 years in Delaware. More corporations incorporated in Delaware than every other state in the union, okay? So I'm not one of these guys that corporations are all bad. They're not. But it's about time they start to pay their fair share. Let me ask you a question. Not a joke. How many of you think the tax system is fair in America? Oh, I'm serious. Guess what? You may remember my talking about when I first got elected. There were 55 of the Fortune 500 companies that made $40 billion in profit in 2020. And guess what? They paid zero, not a single penny in taxes. Not a single penny. I said it was wrong. So I did something outrageous. I was able to impose a 15% tax. My God, 15%. You all pay more than that. You pay twice that. How many construction workers, firefighters, teachers, cops would be happy to pay 15%? You know, I love these guys telling me what they value. My dad used to have an expression. He'd say, don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget. I'll tell you what you value. Let me tell you what I value compared to the other side. Well, I'm here in this Union Hall and with you, Speaker McCarthy just got finished speaking to Wall Street 2 days ago and speaking to the United States Congress a few hours ago. And what we described as the mega's economic vision. It was days before tax day. Do you think he told the wealthy and powerful that it's about time they step up and start paying a fair share? Not a word. Do you think he told the billion-dollar companies to stop stashing profits in tax havens out off the coast and shipping jobs overseas? I didn't hear any of that, did you? Instead, he proposed huge cuts in imports and very important programs that millions of hard-working and middle-class Americans count on. All the while, he and the mega officials are separately pushing for more tax giveaways and overwhelming benefits to the wealthiest Americans and biggest corporations. Folks, it's time the same old trickle-down, dressed-up MAGA clothing is worse than ever. Let's be clear. The plan has details. The plan is straight. That's with the American people. McCarthy comes along and delivers a speech with not a plan. Actually, in some sense, it's pretty simple. For example, he talked about limiting spending. We're all for that, man. Let's limit spending. But look at what he didn't say. He didn't tell you exactly how much he wants to cut, but the House leading Republican proposal will cut critical programs, so-called discretionary spending, by 22%. That would mean cutting the number of people who administer Social Security and Medicare, meaning longer wait times. Higher costs for child care, significantly higher, preschool, college. Higher costs for housing, especially for older Americans, people with disabilities, families with children, veterans. 30 million fewer veterans outpatient visits, leaving our brave warriors to get checkups and mental health services and treatment and subsidies and substance disorders out in the cold. Tens of thousands of people suffering from opioid epidemic would be denied treatment they need for recovery. The MAGA 22% cut undermines rail safety, food safety, border security, clean air, clean water. It's not hyperbole. The fact is, look it up. MAGA Republicans in Congress want to defund the FBI and the police. Talk about defunding. They don't like the FBI. Maybe arresting some of them. It's outrageous. I mean, think about it. Defund the FBI? MAGA Republicans in Congress have introduced a bill that could take food assistance away from as many as 10 million kids, people, 4 million children, and put them at risk of going hungry. The wealthiest country in the world. MAGA Republicans in Congress support cuts in Medicaid that could lead millions of people to losing their health care, including the working poor and people with disabilities. And here's the thing. Do these painful cuts actually help the deficit? Do they actually reduce cost? Well, the honest answer is no. The very first bill that the House Republicans passed was to get rid of the law I signed to crack down on wealthy tax cheats. I'm talking about the multimillionaires and the billionaires. What does it mean? Well, it was estimated by all the experts that they kept cutting the number of IRS agents, not doing your taxes, but doing the incredibly sophisticated taxes required to do the multi-billionaires and millionaires. And guess what? It was estimated that it would, in fact, reduce the deficit because we bring in more money from the super wealthy. We start to pay their fair share. Make it easier for the wealthy to get away with cheating on their taxes. They wanted to get rid of these IRS agents. Well, that's what they proposed again. And folks, while you pay your taxes, others aren't. They want to increase the deficit and get rid of the corporate minimum tax of 15%. Look, I want to make sure that the $2 trillion Trump tax cut that he passed in his last term, only term, for $2 trillion. Well, I didn't mean it that way. I didn't mean it that way. But they want to take that $2 trillion tax cut that overwhelmingly helped the super. I don't know how many of you guys benefit from that tax cut, to make it permanent. And that tax cut in the previous 4 years ballooned the deficit by over 40%. They want to continue it. And by the way, the tax cuts didn't help very much. Overwhelmingly benefit the wealthiest, the biggest corporations. The super wealthy families making more than, for example, $4 million a year got an average tax cut of $175,000. How much did you get? MAGA Republicans in Congress also want to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, which will increase the deficit because right now, allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices they have to pay to provide for prescription drugs for the elderly. Guess what? That saves the government $160 billion because they're paying that much less and the people are getting the benefit. And by the way, the previous administration cut the number of IRS agents by reviewing these complicated tax returns. That was part of it as well. The Inflation Reduction Act gives the IRS agents the need to get the number of agents they need to get the taxes owed. It was estimated that it would recover over $100 billion in taxes owed if they were able to have these agents looking at them. And, all of this reduces the debt that I proposed by $240 billion over the next 10 years. And the MAGA Republicans want to repeal it. Folks, that's the MAGA economic agenda. Spending cuts for working and middle-class folks, Americans, and tax cuts for those at the top of the pile. It's not about fiscal discipline. It's about cutting benefits for folks that don't seem to care much about. It's about finding ways to squeeze out more of America's middle class. They should be getting tax relief themselves, not the super wealthy. Imagine denying some veterans the Medicare they need, the medical care they need, so the big corporations can keep paying their taxes. I felt very strongly about the legislation we passed that affected the ability of us to take care of those folks who died as a consequence or sick because of burn pits. My son was one of those kids. Spent a year in Iraq. I've been in and out of Iraq and Iran, but Iraq, not Iran, I misspoke, Iraq and Afghanistan over 30 times. When I saw him when he was in Iraq, in Baghdad, he was less than a couple hundred yards from one of those burn pits. They're 10 feet deep, the size of a football field, and they burn everything in it, from jet fuel to toxic. A lot of you guys know folks who are firemen. How many people came back with cancer as a consequence of going to 9/11, and we finally took care of them? Well, I was determined to take care of these kids, and we got it passed. We got it passed. Imagine trading off less food inspections so the wealthy can have a giant tax cut. Imagine denying poor and disabled Americans on Medicaid, not Medicare, the treatment they need for asthma, diabetes, so the wealthiest Americans can keep cheating on their taxes. And by that, I'm saying every wealthy American cheats on their taxes. But we have 1,000 billionaires in America. You know the average tax rate they pay? 8%. 8%. I proposed a better way. How about starting with big oil? Guess what? We're still going to need some oil. But they made $200 billion in profit last year in the middle of a global energy crisis because they weren't reinvesting in refineries. And they received in the process an additional $30 billion subsidy from the taxpayers. I'm going to cut those wasteful subsidies for big oil, saving taxpayers $30 billion. MAGA Republicans want to protect those subsidies for big oil. We just finally beat Big Pharma by giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug costs. I want to keep going. MAGA Republicans in Congress want to hand Big Pharma back in power. Just think about it. We have now about 1,000, as I said, billionaires. Their average tax is 8%, as I said. It's wrong. That's why I proposed a billionaire minimum tax. No billionaire should be paying less of a tax rate than a school teacher or a firefighter. But folks, here's what's really dangerous. MAGA Republicans in Congress are threatening to default on the national debt. The debt that took 230 years to accumulate overall, unless we do what they say. They say they're going to default unless I agree to all these wacko notions they have. Default would be worse than totally irresponsible. It would mean cuts in Social Security and Medicare, higher interest rates for things like credit cards, car loans, mortgages. Working people, middle class, seniors would pay the price for the entire economy would be at risk. America's never defaulted on our debt, which has accumulated over 200 years. Let's remember, the last administration alone increased the national debt by 40% in 4 years, yet every single year they passed the debt limit. Every single year. In a speech to Wall Street, the speaker failed to guarantee he would be the first speaker not to default on our debt. Let's be clear. If he fails, the American people will be devastated. Not just 10 or 20 years from now, but today. The speaker likes to quote his hero, Ronald Reagan, who I knew because I was a senator. But he doesn't quote everything Reagan said. Reagan said, debt ceiling brinkmanships threatens the holders of government bonds and those who rely on Social Security and veterans benefits in the United States has a special responsibility to itself and to the world to meet its obligation. He goes on to say it means we have a well-earned reputation of reliability, credibility, two things that set us apart from the rest of the world. That's what Ronald Reagan said. Donald Trump, seeking to increase the debt limit while he was doing what he was doing. He said, quote, I can't imagine anybody ever even thinking about using the debt ceiling as a negotiating wedge. I guess he didn't know the new MAGA Republicans he bred. America is not a deadbeat nation. We meet our obligations. And I made clear to Speaker McCarthy about how we should proceed to settle our differences. No one should do anything to jeopardize the full faith and credit of the United States of America. Instead, I'm making threats of default if I don't go along with what they want, which would be catastrophic to the country. If we don't do it, they say they're going to let default take place. Take default off the table. And let's have a real, serious, detailed conversation about how to grow the economy, lower costs, and reduce the deficit. First time ever, I said, I'll lay my budget on the table by March the 9th. You lay your budget on the table, and then we'll negotiate. MAGA Republicans owe the people the same. Offer a plan, not speeches. Offer a budget that levels to the American people exactly what you intend to do and how you're going to cut. What tax giveaways you plan to extend to the super wealthy. What it means for the deficit. Let me close with this. My economic plan for the middle class is transforming our economy to be stronger, fairer, more innovative, more competitive. That's where all of you come in. Without you, we can't rebuild America. And again, that's not her part. We cannot rebuild America without you. You're part of the bold plan to invest in America that I have. In all of America, including the places and people who have been forgotten. You build the roads, the bridges. You're going to take all those lead pipes out of our system, make it safer to generate economic growth for the country. You got more to do, but we made a lot of progress, and we just got to keep it going. Because of you, we're on the move. I can honestly say, and I mean this, I've been doing this a long time, but I've never, ever, ever been more optimistic about America. We just have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity. Nothing we've ever set our mind to, we've not been able to do when we've done it together. So God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you so much.